Reddit is a great source of scary and unnerving content these days, and one of the best places I've found is a subreddit known as r/AskReddit. In this video, I will be going over 5 supposedly real stories. Some friends and I were fishing a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water, like someone throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We thought someone was messing with us, and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later, I'm fishing in a different pond and hear the same sound. Turns out it was beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers become problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds in town. I work for a power company, restoring power after a storm. I was working when a lady came up complaining that her power went out. We explained to her that's why we were there, and she should have her power back soon. She said, "Oh good, my son went down in the basement and now I can't find him." I went with her with a flashlight down the road to a rundown house that was partially caved in. She walked inside and I went to follow. As soon as I walked into the door, she disappeared from my sight, and then I called for her for multiple times. No one responded, so I ran back to our work truck to call for help. A man that was living on our street called to me asking what's wrong, and I told him the situation. He looked at me with a cold stare and said a mom and her son died in that house 4 years ago. I'm still shook to this day. I work for a medical examiner and used to be on the graveyard shift alone. The first night I was on at midnight on the dot, our air system shut off, which caused the vents to warp. That shit sounded like somebody running through the vents in the ceiling on all fours. Thankfully I got used to it, lol, but deaf creepy at first. Another night we lost power and stupid me watching a horror movie working so hard almost shit my pants when everything went dark, and knowing that a room with about 30 dead bodies in it was in walking distance away. That one I stayed in my car for, not to mention the constant long dark red lit hallways. Glad I'm not on overnight now. Used to teach outdoor education, which was essentially just summer camp during the school year, and school groups would come up and spend a few days at the camp. On their last night, we would always tell them a scary story around the campfire. It was the same scary story every time. We worked in partners, so there were always 2 staff members for every school group. One staff member would tell the story, and the other staff member would go hide in the forest and make scary noises. So I'm telling the story, and every few minutes there's like a snap of a twig or rustling in the bushes, and of course, as always, the kids get all freaked out and they start getting scared. It's very fun. Well, as I'm telling this story, I'm walking around the campfire looking at all the kids' faces, and I notice a familiar one. My partner Eric, sitting there smiling at me, wondering why I'm staring at him. My heart has never started beating so fast in my life. Eventually, I sped through the story, and all the kids left, and I explained to Eric that I thought it was him in the woods, and his eyes got very wide, and he said, "Are you telling me that wasn't one of the staff members?" So we both ran back to the main road. And then for the last story, this one's a doozy, so buckle in. During college, that was located far away from major cities, the woods were all around us. That being said, there was a highly rated trail, the Loyal Sock Trail, which was about an hour drive from the university. I invited a friend to come with me as he had never been on an extended backpacking trip. A 50-plus mile trail that we intended to backpack over the 4-day weekend. I'm an Eagle Scout who has spent countless hours in the woods and went on backpacking trips consistently through my college experience. As many have said before me, you get used to the minor spooky things happening. Coyote howls, raccoons in the middle of the night, even the occasional unknown noise. The scariest thing to find in the woods, however, are people. We were about 20 miles into the trail, and being in Pennsylvania where the underbrush and trees line the trails pretty densely. I always walk about 100 meters off the trail to reduce the chances of me disturbing people or people disturbing me, especially in the early morning when I choose to sleep in. Following that same strategy, my friend and I go out of our way to be in this amazing spot a good ways off the trail, where it would be even difficult to see our flashlights from the trail. The spot was on a peninsula where a creek met a river, meaning that there was only one way into our camp and only one way out. We start a fire, cook our food, and drink some, but not enough to get either of us drunk. We put the fire out about midnight and go into our individual tents. All is quiet. It is the fall semester, so leaves are on the ground, the moon is brightly shining through the bare trees, and the air is cool. The only noise is the occasional time where I would hear my friend turn over in his sleep. Then I hear the voices. The voices sound very close for being on the trail 100+ meters away. I check my watch. 3 a.m.? Who hikes at 3 a.m.? We are 20 miles in. I slowly get out of my sleeping bag, slowly unzip my tent, only to see my friend peeking out of his tent in the exact same fashion. He quickly moves his finger over his mouth in an exaggerated hush signal, then uses the same hand to frantically motion towards the way of the trail. Then we see them. 4 adults, 3 men, and 1 woman, walking directly towards our camp. No lights illuminating their path, they are walking silently at this point. Only one of them has a backpack, an impossibility for the long hike they were 1/3 of the way through. Being a long trip, you bring wood cutting supplies to chop branches into smaller branches to burn. For me, this is a survival knife. Grabbing the knife, believing it my only way of defending myself, I am more disheveled than I've ever been, especially knowing that a knife is barely defense at all. These people walk into our site, sit down by our extinguished fire pit, and just sit there for what felt like an eternity. My friend speaks up and asks what they are doing at our campsite. Without answering the question, they ask if we have any food. Having packed as lightly as possible for the long trip, we only had a few extra Mountain House MRE style meals. I grab one out of my bag and toss it to one of the men. In rapid succession, I ask why they aren't using a light, if they need help finding the trail, and why they are hiking so late. They respond with the following. 1. We don't use lights. 2. We know where the trail is. 3. It is better to hike late at night. Unnerved at this point, my friend asks them to leave. They respond by asking if we want to light the fire and hang out for a bit. No, we do not. They grab their bag, get up and leave without speaking another word. We watch them leave and then take shifts, making sure that they don't come back. Needless to say, we both got very little sleep that night. When the sun rose the next morning, we finally got real sleep. By the afternoon, when we woke up, it was all felt like a weird dream of sorts. The only evidence was a fuzzy cap that must have been dropped that I have to this day. I have never had something as weird, spooky as that happen in the woods, and hope to never have it happen again. In the 8 years since that trip, I haven't been back to the Loyalsock Trail. Alright, that was 5 tales from an Ask Reddit horror story. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.